So welcome one and all to this year's Christmas tour. And the Christmas tour is a thing that I enjoy repeating because I think there's something about Christmas that makes us enjoy the repetition. We spend so much of our year thinking about how we're going to break it up, how we're going to kind of mix it up, get rid of the kind of mundane, bring a bit of excitement in. But there's something about this time of year that makes us want to dive headlong into these kind of repeated patterns of behaviour. There's something about Christmas being the same, and that so much of that repetition, our idea of what Christmas is, and of course, for all of us, it's going to be variations, but usually the same kind of things: time off work, friends and family, food and drink, decorations, trees, gifts, maybe some singing, goodwill, be helping out here and there, thinking of those less fortunate. So there's all these kind of elements in it, but there's something about the way that we experience it that we want to experience it pretty much over and over and over again. And I think so much of these patterns are set in our childhood that we look to kind of replicate. So it seemed to me many years ago when I first started getting interested in Christmas that what is it that's different about us at this time of the year? And so I thought what would be interesting, we think, well, perhaps if we kind of go back to the beginnings, find when it was we started to behave in the way that we behave at this time of year, maybe we could find the answers to the questions there about what it is about Christmas that makes us kind of feel this way. So there's a lot of ideas, a lot of theories. At times there's not so much history. You have to kind of piece together bits and pieces of what exists. And of course, with all this stuff, we can never say everybody did this in precisely the way I'm going to describe. What I'm talking about is the bits and pieces we're going to kind of pull together that give us the best kind of understanding. And if we're going to say how far back do these celebrations go at this time of year, the only answer we can really say is we don't know. All we can do is we can talk about the oldest records that we have. And if we're going to talk about the oldest records that we have, then that's going to take us all the way back to the people of ancient Egypt at about 5,000 years ago. So if this is going to work, I'm going to move the chat to this side. We will see, hopefully, in just a moment that will come up for you. And we're going to take you back to 5,000 years ago, the Egypt of 3000 BC. And this is the oldest records that we have of celebrations, through hieroglyphics, of course, of this time of the year. And they tell us a story of a nomadic people who'd crisscrossed the desert and had done for thousands of years, following the harvest, following the animals. But about 5,000 years ago, they stopped and they began to farm on the banks of the River Nile. They created what we would call civilization. And when they settled, they began to tell stories to kind of make sense of the world. And what they'd already kind of understood was that the night sky was the key. And Horus, the god you're about to see portrayed here as a falcon, was the personification of the Egyptian people. Pharaoh was Horus on earth, and Horus was the god of the skies, the god of the heavens. He was the Lord of goodness, that provided for. He was the benefactor. He looked after the people of Egypt. He was the Lord of light. And he was set against Set. And Set was his uncle. His uncle was precisely the opposite. He was jealous. He'd killed Horus's father, Isis, because he was jealous. And he prevented Isis and Osiris bearing a son properly, but nonetheless through divine intervention, Isis becomes pregnant, Horus is born. And the Egyptian people see the world as a constant battle between the forces of good and evil, light and darkness. So here we can see Horus with the sun being portrayed as the light, and Set as the serpent. So this idea of good and evil, light and darkness, hope and despair is being played out constantly in the Egyptian kind of imagination. And these two opposing forces are what the rules of the world, if you like, kind of come upon. And so the Egyptian people see this as kind of playing out every night in the night sky. They see a tussle between light and darkness, hope and despair. But every morning, of course, they can celebrate that Horus and the force of light have once more kind of triumphed over darkness, hope over despair. And Horus was born on the 25th of December. And that date is not an accident. That date was arrived at by observation. These Egyptian people had become masters at understanding the night sky, going back to their nomadic years when it was too hot to walk during the daytime. They moved by night and they followed the stars, and they developed a huge and precise understanding of how you could travel and navigate by the use of the night sky. And so when they settled and they began to build apparatus to help them measure. And they noticed something very, very interesting at this time of year. That around about the 21st of December, the sky stops moving. We enter a period which is known as the solstice, the still sun. For 3 days, for 3 nights, nothing happens. And they were so understanding, they were so knowledgeable about it. Here you're looking at the great temple of Karnak in Egypt. They could build a temple that was precisely in line with where the sun was going to set and rise on the winter solstice. That's in Egypt. I could have shown you Stonehenge in England, Newgrange in Ireland. All over the ancient world, people understood intimately the patterns of the night sky, the movements of the earth, and how the earth's clock worked. And what they noticed is that on the 25th of December, something very interesting, something very special happens. That once again, the sun starts to turn. The day becomes precisely 1 minute longer. The solstice is over. And we begin in the northern hemisphere to tip now towards the sun. To warmer, lighter days, to longer days, and of course towards the harvest. And so that is the stories they were telling were related to the harvest. A prayer to Horus, a celebration, and they would decorate their homes with garlands of greenery. And we're told that these garlands of greenery represented the unique fertility of the Nile Delta, an area that was nothing really more than a desert. But of course you then had this river, this god that they venerated, that twice a year burst its banks and spread this fertile mud everywhere that then allowed it to grow. So the celebration originally of Horus's birth on the 25th of December, this beginning of the solar new year, was linked to the harvest. It was a celebration of the renewal of the planet from foodstuffs to come. So that's kind of its oldest roots that we know about. It could, of course, have other roots. There could be evidence comes out in the coming years that will allow us to go back even further. All we can say is that as long as there's been human beings on this planet writing things down, creating history, in other words, the recording of events, there has been some celebration at this time of year. So it really is a truly ancient and profound celebration of midwinter. Everything that has come after seems to come and be sourced within these kind of early events. And the Egyptians captured them. Not say they were the first to do it, but they were the ones that wrote it down for us. So how then does it move? How does it come from ancient Egypt and spread its way across the world? Well, it seems the answer to that is the next people. It's the Romans. Because what we know about the Romans is initially they come across the Mediterranean. They come to trade with these Egyptian people. Initially, I'm sure it's kind of commercial, but of course, they cannot help but notice the wealth of Egypt. These are the richest people on earth with gold in the hills. So it seems that the Roman attitudes change quite quickly. They move from trading to conquering. Egypt becomes part of the greater Roman Empire. And it seems that they absorb these ideas. They take on board, thank you, they take on board the celebrations, the sacred importance of the winter solstice, and, of course, this date, the 25th of December. And that wherever they go subsequently, they take these ideas with them. So that, we believe, is how it begins to spread. So if we now leave behind Egypt and we take you across to Rome on a journey, how funky is that? I'm just going to open a drink. It's alcohol free, by the way, you will see me a bit. So we've arrived at Palatine Hill now, and I want to talk about the Roman festival now of Saturnalia. So it's lovely, very funky animation showing us the temple here of Saturn, founded in 500 BC in Rome. And Saturn was the Roman god of agriculture, of the harvest. He is the guy that puts food on the table. Also famous for eating his kids, which isn't very Christmassy, but nonetheless, Saturn was the god of the harvest. And so Saturnalia, this festival of Saturn, was essentially a midwinter prayer for the harvest. It was all about coming together when the agricultural year was over, praying hard, celebrating, and then having a big long party. If you wonder, when did we start getting drunk and having fun and silliness at Christmas? Well, that's Romans. It's Saturnalia. They had a 6-day, back-to-back, night after night, get drunk, throw your hair, do whatever, singing, dancing, drinking, gambling, lots of cavorting, all the Roman orgy stuff you've heard about. You can see in the background there, you've got the garlands of green. But it really is a full-on 6-day sort of orgy of kind of bacchanalian behaviour. And Saturn comes from what they call the Golden Age of Rome. And this was an age before when all men were equal. So consequently, it didn't really sit well with the Romans, who were a slave-owning society. So in order to kind of square that circle, everybody was treated the same during Saturnalia. Everything's going to close down. The shops, the businesses, the schools, etc. And so as a result of that, everybody gets to take part. And in the very kind of progressive households, the masters will serve at the table of the servants. But you can't necessarily tell them apart because people will dress in a very similar manner during Saturnalia, in little kind of sort of tops, little leather hats. And the idea is equality kind of runs through it. And you may well have a bowl of nuts beside you at Christmas. That comes from Saturnalia. The reason was, one of the great pastimes during Saturnalia was gambling. They'd get drunk, have loads to eat, and then get the gambling boards out. But of course, you can't really expect rich men to gamble with slaves. That's not really terribly fair with the slaves. They're going to run out of money very quickly. So instead, everybody gambled with nuts. And that way, they're going to level playing field, right? So nuts, if you wonder where nuts at Christmas comes from, it's from Saturnalia and kind of Roman gambling. So the whole thing you'll see coming into your picture now, a guy with a garland right in the middle, that's the Lord of Mistral. Generally speaking, he was a soldier, quite a rough-hewn guy. It was his job to be in charge of the fun, to make sure that everybody got involved one way or another in the singing, in the dancing, in the drinking, in the eating, in the games, you name it. But also he was there to make fun of the hierarchy because everything was at an inversion. What they saw at this kind of time of year was that you had, in essence, the light had given way to the darkness. So what this kind of ushered in for the Romans was first of all, they saw it as Luna taking over, and the goddess Luna was responsible for kind of mystery and romance and intrigue, but also just a lot of fun. And so the whole thing is a big drinking vibe, and this walking the streets, shouting out all hours of the day and the night, lo, Saturnalia. And some of you may well have been on my tour very recently in York, and you will have seen guys dressed up just like this, shouting out, carrying the candles. And this was the thing, because the candles, of course, brought light into the darkness. Candles were a celebration of the returning of the light. So the whole thing is bedded in thinking forward to the harvest, to summer, to light nights. And they exchanged gifts. On the final day, kind of cigarilla was the gifts. And so candles were very popular, little wax figurines, which could then be sort of in a mock sort of slaughter. So there was all sorts of kind of would go on, but it's drinking, it's eating, it's partying, it's playing, It's kind of inverting hierarchies. The Lord of the Mistral wears ivy around his head, which is a kind of female symbol, female fertility symbol. So you got male into female, you got dark into night, order into chaos, hierarchies inverted. The whole thing is a total rejection of the kind of the normal Roman way. And the normal Roman way, of course, was order, discipline, structure. But of course, during this period of time, then all of that would go out the window. That embraced chaos, and a bit like the Hindu belief. Is it Krishna that dances at the edge of time in this constant cycle of creation and destruction? It's the idea of destroying the old year to create the new. So from this Saturnalia, from this chaos, from this celebration, they could expect then a brand new year, and that year will bring them good opportunities, good victories in battle, good harvests, good conquering, you name it, whatever they kind of wanted, good engineering. Then Saturnalia would pave the way for all this to happen. So it's kind of this period of destruction, but kind of replenishment. A bit like putting manure on the field. You've dug it all out, you've burned it, you now put your manure on, and from that you get the growth kind of all over again. So that is kind of Saturnalia. And Saturnalia, I think, is a really, really, really interesting kind of precursor, because whilst we've got this kind of the sacred with the Egyptians, the Romans had fun. And Saturnalia is a 6-day festival. So it starts on the 17th of December and it runs all the way through the 23rd of December. So it's either side of the winter solstice. You've got these 6 days of partying, day and night. And of course, in places like Iberacum, the Roman fortress where I'm kind of sat now, you've got these soldiers hundreds of miles away from their wives and families. They are going to get up to all manner of stuff. And as a result of that, kind of what happens in Saturnalia had to stay in Saturnalia for discretion being the better part of it. I'll put my gloves back on so you can see. So, for those that are wondering, by the way, it's in tribute to York's Nutcracker this year. I thought I would make a bit of a kind of Nutcracker sort of feel to my dress this evening. I desisted from the red circles on my cheeks, which perhaps I should have done. But fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. So hopefully you're all now getting in a thoroughly crispy mood, but wondering, when is it then that actually this thing called Christmas comes along? Because you've said this about Christmas, and so far you've talked about Egyptian gods and devils. You've talked about Romans getting drunk, getting up to all sorts of disreputable behaviour. The one thing you haven't done so far is talk about Christmas. Well, that's all about to change, because it is time for us to talk about the very first Christmas day, which is where we bring in a new character whose name is Constantine. And Constantine, of course, is Constantine of York. So I'm sure many of you will be aware of him. You'll have seen him on my tours. He sits here outside the Minster. Let's get to it. So Constantine, let's start with why he's here. So Constantine was the commander-in-chief of the Roman forces at Iberacum. His father, Constantius Chlorus, was the Roman emperor. And in the year 306 AD, Constantius Chlorus and his kind of imperial party came all the way to Iberacum, to York, to visit his son. And you can kind of see the Roman Empire kind of popping up. You'll see his father died while he was there, so Constantine becomes the emperor. And you see now the size of the empire that he basically takes on board. It is huge. It is essentially, basically, kind of far too big. The thing with the Romans are they're kind of victims of their own success. They've conquered most of the known world, but as a result of that, they are now going to kind of incorporate within the Roman Empire all these. Just going to go back to you and just see that again. All these elements of the kind of nations, the Huns, the Gauls, the Franks, etc., and a lot of them don't get on. Let's pause it there. So, consequently, what Constantine is dealing with is the internal dynamics of managing the Roman Empire. And in order to try and bring about a peace, make it kind of manageable, he has this big idea. And what he's going to do is he's going to try and use Christianity as a kind of social glue, a way of creating a Roman identity, a pan-Roman Empire identity based on Christianity. And that in doing so, what that's going to do is allow people to kind of live and let live a little bit, to kind of play nicely, as you might say, and stop all the warring. The only trouble that Constantine has got is that when he comes to power, Christianity is this tiny underground religion. It's been almost wiped out by one of his predecessors, Diocletian. It's the time Christians to the lions and so forth. So Constantine's really got his work cut out. Not least because the major belief system is that of the god Mithras, the Mithratic cult, who the Romans know as Sol Invictus, the sun god. He's kind of portrayed, you're going to see him in a moment, with a halo. You can see there the sun's rays coming out of his head. There's Mithras, who's also born on the 25th of December. And so now, at the end of Saturnalia, we've then got this kind of 2 days, which ramped up even further. We've got 6 days of Saturnalia, 17th through the 23rd of December. Now on the 24th, we've got the Feast of the Eve of Sol Invictus. On the 25th, his birthday. So it's now an 8-day celebration, celebrating the birth of the sun god. And so Constantine has really got a job on his hands. And what he kind of goes to the church and argues is that, look, we've got this 8-day winter festival. People come together, they celebrate, they drink, they have a good time, they exchange gifts. If we want to convert people towards Christianity, maybe a really good idea would be if we create a Christian winter festival. If we were to make it centre around the winter solstice, but also have the 25th of December as a real kind of key date of importance. If we make birth a centre part of it, because it's a celebration of the birth of the sun god in the Roman cult, we give people time off work, then it'd be kind of easy to transition people from one to another. So this is Constantine's idea, in effect a rebrand, taking something that already exists and giving it this new Christian identity. And you'd think the church would bit its hand off. They've spent the last sort of 20 years being persecuted, but actually they're very reluctant to get involved. The reason they say is, how can we celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ when we've no idea when it was that he was born? It's simply not mentioned in the Bible. And of course, you wouldn't have shepherds in the field in December, so we know December's out. It's not December. So there's different ideas from different theologians about when his birth date was. All people can agree with is he was born at night in the stable. So these Christ masses go on at different times in different parts of the empire, around the empire, but they're always said after the sun has gone down. That's where our midnight mass kind of comes from. So the eve of the mass. So for 20 years, backwards and forwards, Constantine is arguing, calling kind of religious conferences, calling people together, arguing in favour of this Christian festival. He is a very, very active. There's Constantine kind of right in the centre in your kind of next picture, and presenting to the theologians who are all holding their Bibles this notion, this creed, this belief that Christmas and this Christian festival could be the root of how to transform how people will behave, think and act across the Roman Empire. One guy there on the floor, asleep, doesn't seem terribly impressed, it would seem. So for 20 years backwards and forwards, Constantine argues in favour of this. But he gets basically nowhere. The church do not want to know. But then finally, he catches a break. In 336, everything changed. 336 AD, that is, because on the 31st of December in the year 335, the Pope dies. And before they can appoint a new Pope, Constantine says, right, we're all agreed, 25th of December it is, that's what we're going to do. And because Constantine is emperor, he's got the power to issue a proclamation that can go out across the empire to every settlement, to every village, to every town, to every nation, to say on the 25th of December, we're going to come together and do this thing called Christmas. And that's what happens. On the 25th of December, in the year 336 AD, for the very first time, we have this thing called Christmas Day. It's a huge success. There are written sources about it, because the Romans wrote things down, so we know it went really well. People liked it. Now, perhaps because Constantine is by now an old man, he's kind of attained his lifetime's ambition. He dies early the following year. So the guy who brought us Christmas Day only actually experienced one. A bit shortchanged, really, when you think about it. But such was the kind of regard that Constantine was held in. They did it again the following year. So on the 25th of December in the year 337 AD, once again, people came together and did this thing called Christmas in honour of Constantine. And people enjoyed it. They created a tradition. And of course, the theologians would continue to argue. It's got nothing to do with the birth of Christ. People said, okay, we like it, it's happening. And it only took a remarkably short period of time, 14 years in total. Because in the year 350 AD, the Roman Catholic Christian Church declared the official birthday of Jesus Christ to be the 25th of December. And we've celebrated Christmas on that day ever since. So if we're looking for a kind of Father Christmas in our story, then quite clearly Constantine is he. He is the man that brings us Christmas Day. But he's not the only deity to be born on Christmas Day, on 25th of December. We have Krishna, 25th of December, Buddha, 25th of December, Mithras, 25th of December. So it seems that from ancient times, this was the date that was recognised as being the premier date of importance. So it makes a great deal of sense. If you've got 365 days to choose from for Jesus' birthday, why not pick the date that has held sacred importance since the beginning of time? So I think it's quite apposite that Jesus' birthday is on the 25th of December, but just never mistake for a moment that it is a marking of his actual birth. It is nothing of no truth in that whatsoever. So lots of ideas about when he was born. People do why I'm working backwards. If you're interested, there's lots of writings on this. It's quite easy to count backwards because obviously they know when Jesus died. Easter, Passover, they know his ministry was for a shade over 3 years, so they kind of count back that way, and it would seem Jesus was born in the spring. So if you ever wondered when he was born, the answer is probably in the spring, which makes Annunciation Day, the 25th of March, also wrong. But I don't want to get into a theology tour. This is a tour about Christmas, but that's the beginning of Christmas Day. So if anybody says, how did Christmas Day start? The answer is with Constantine. He is the granddaddy of it all. He is our Father Christmas and a napist. So you'd think then that in effect we'd go, well, that's the end of our story. Christmas has arrived. We've created Christmas Day. We've got this now Christian celebration. We still have it. So consequently, why would it not be the case that, that's the end of the story? Well, the answer is that certainly in this country at least, it's not that simple. Because about 70 years after Constantine introduces Christmas, the Romans up and leave these islands. They're under pressure. They need, you've seen how big the Roman Empire is, they need the soldiers elsewhere to defend Rome. So consequently they withdraw from these islands. It's kind of depopulated. And then in the coming decades, we are then resettled by people coming all the way across the North Sea and from Northwest Europe. So from the Low Countries, Germany, Denmark, the kind of modern sort of names to them, the people we now call Anglo-Saxons come and settle in Britain. What we now think of as the ancient English, if you like, are in fact from mainland Europe. And they, of course, have a very different belief system. They have what we would now call a pagan belief, but pagan doesn't describe anything. Pagan simply means non-Christian, so it really is a kind of a wrap it all up term to sort of say nothing, basically. But what we do know is that they are particularly venerated nature, and they particularly venerated motherhood, and that what they would celebrate, these Anglo-Saxon peoples, was a festival which was known as Modronit, which means Mother's Night. So the Mother's Night, they would count down the days to the Mother's Night, a kind of party each night. But Mother's Night was the biggest of them all. And Mother's Night was a celebration of motherhood, but also kind of childbirth, child rearing, and kind of continuity at the end of the day. If we're going to sort of think about more primitive societies, obviously a constant birth rate was incredibly important. If you were going to be able to compete with your enemies for resources in battle and so forth, you need a new supply of people. So childbirth, child rearing was incredibly important, and it was kind of put right at the top of the kind of social order. So parents were seen as really kind of that you're doing your bit for the tribe. So Modronic Mother's Night was a celebration of motherhood. It was celebrated two elements of motherhood, both the mothers that are here today, but also those that came before, our ancestors, our kind of continuity. And to celebrate Modronate in advance of it, they would decorate their homes and their buildings with holly and ivy. Now, ivy, I've mentioned earlier, is a fertility symbol. It represents eternal life. The idea is you can't kill ivy. No matter what you do to it, it'll always come back. So ivy is female. But holly, you might not be aware, is male and female. But the female carries the berries. So if you put together holly and ivy, you've got female and female. And the female invoke a third powerful female we call Mother Earth, Mother Nature, Gaia in some cultures. It is a kind of an important idea of kind of fertility, of the earth's bounty, of nature kind of giving forth. And this kind of representation, the holly and the ivy, representing mothers that are all here, mothers that could have come before, creating this kind of third magical fertility, is a prayer for the harvest. Because whilst this Modronate happened on the 24th of December, it wasn't Christmas Eve. These people weren't Christians. In fact, the 24th of December was actually New Year's Eve. Because for these people, these Anglo-Saxons, the 25th of December was New Year's Day. So the day the year started, so that day again, different culture, but the same idea. The 25th of December as giving birth to the new year, to the harvest, to life, to fertility, to renewal. And all the way across Anglo-Saxon remains and sites, we find this image that you've got now, these images, they're called the three Maries, three women representing the three states of motherhood, and you see a baby on the lap in the middle there. They were called the three Maries. And the three kind of Maries represent this eternal chain of motherhood, this continuity, and they're portrayed all over the Anglo-Saxon world. And what's kind of interesting about this, of course, is that before long, the church starts to kind of bite back. They are incredibly keen to see these islands converted. And so at the beginning of the 7th century, here in Eboracum in York, we get King Edwin of Northumbria converts to Christianity on his wedding day. He's marrying a Christian. As a result of that, the price of that wedding is he needs to convert to Christianity. He's not allowed to marry a pagan. So consequently, you then see, obviously, the state adoption of Christianity. That is now going to be the kind of ruling thing. And of course, then they're going to set out to convert these Anglo-Saxon pagans to become Christians. That's easier said than done. These are people that are largely illiterate. It is an oral culture. Plus, of course, the biblical language is Latin. So stories and ideas become much more important, if you like, than written scripts. And what the Christian church seeks to do at this stage is to draw very strong parallels and use the stories and the ideas that it's already got within its kind of creed as a kind of recruiting tool. So we know we've got the 24th of December as this night of celebration of motherhood in pagan society. So as these people are then sort of scooped up and are now expected to start to follow a Christian creed, so Modronich is pushed out. But the 24th of December is kept sacred. And instead of a celebration of motherhood generically, it becomes a celebration of one mother looking for a safe place to give birth to a child. What we see is the emergence of Mary right now at the heart of Christian culture. She doesn't really exist as a meaningful force in the early church, but now Christmas Eve takes over. We see the nativity come in. So we know it didn't happen at this time of year. We know the Magi and all these things didn't really happen on one night. But we create this story, this celebration of motherhood, and we put it in front of people so they can understand that in moving from an Anglo-Saxon belief to a Christian belief, essentially it's still the same. On the 24th of December, it's a sacred night where we rejoice at the importance of childbirth, of child rearing. And so we can see how the Christian church is incredibly successful at scooping up these pagans and moving people into the Christian family by use of symbols, of ideas, of stories. And it's from this point onwards, whilst of course it's mentioned in the Bible, the Nativity, these are not stories. In the early Christian church, it's about deaths, it's about martyrs, that are the important stories. It's not the birth of Christ, it's the ministrations of Christ, it's the death and resurrection of Christ. So suddenly we now get Nativity is given this central position. And as I say, it's all about the conversion of Anglo-Saxon and pagan peoples across Europe, and now given a mother figure to kind of cheer for, which I think is wonderful. I absolutely love that. I don't see it with any cynicism kind of whatsoever. I think it's really smart, and I kind of admire where they're kind of coming from on that. But I do kind of find it fascinating. So Modronich has hung on, and some scholars have gone as far as to say, and this is now not something that I'm going to say I agree with, but it's nonetheless quite interesting, that the three Maries end up being put into the Bible, or rather being celebrated and drawn from the Bible and celebrated as the three Marys: Mary, mother of Jesus, Mary of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. So the three Marys, the three most important female figures in the Bible. Some people will say, in effect, is a reflection of the three Marys in Anglo-Saxon pagan culture. I'm not going to comment either way on that, but it's interesting that constantly people are looking to draw parallels and draw lines, that there may well actually be one kind of narrative that then there's nuances, our kind of understanding of kind of what that looks like, and individual faiths will have different kind of ways of telling and understanding these stories, but they have a great deal in common. But as I say, I'm not going to stray into sort of territory which might be kind of controversial or unproven, simply to say that some people have commented upon that. So let me just have a quick sip of my 0% alcohol drink. It's my 50th day of sobriety. Not that I was a roaring drunk, but I've decided to not have a drink until Christmas. So this is day 50 without a drink. So just so you can see, I'm on 0%. So I'm doing my bit for sobriety. So let us kind of move on into the kind of the next phase. So up until now, we've kind of talked, obviously, a great deal about the sort of Christian journey and how we've got to the kind of modern Christmas, and how that has kind of helped to bring about kind of mass growth, if you like, of the Christian church. But it's time to talk about this other festival that runs alongside the Christian one, that is entirely separate, but at the same time is so relevant. We often find it incredibly difficult to separate it from what we call Christmas, because actually we have two things that run in parallel alongside each other. One, the Christian festival, the Nativity, etc. The other is the Viking festival. And the name of the Viking winter festival is Yule. And every night on the street of York, when I say to people, what's the name? Nobody knows. But of course, the minute you say Yule, they go, oh, as if it was almost a trick question. And it's not. What it is, I think, is a demonstration of how far Yule has got embedded within our kind of psychology, that we think nothing of people saying Yule or Yuletide as to mean the same thing, but it relates something completely different from a wholly different cultural source. It relates to the Vikings, and of course York, being Jorvik, the home of the Anglo-Scandinavian Empire for 200 years, we're remarkably well placed to talk about Yule. Let's do that now. So Yule, was a period of time in December and January, lasting 12 days. So 12 days of Christmas, Viking, number one, nailed it, right? Keep count with these. Incredibly kind of important time for the Vikings, not least because it was time when families would come back together. So the men would spend an awful lot of time of the year away. Maybe they're away farming, maybe they're away raiding, fighting, trading, navigating, but they were home for Yule. So it's got a kind of cultural and social significance, big bonding family at the time. A successful Yule meant lots of September babies. So you kind of get the idea. Families coming together, man and wife, not seeing each other for a while, lots of babies off the back of that. So again, they're venerating kind of childhood. And in anticipation of the men coming home, they're going to go out, and each village is going to cut down a large oak tree. And the oak tree is then going to be cut into huge logs. And this, of course, is the Yule log, which has now become a Christmas cake, or at least in this country. I'm not quite sure about where you are, but it's a Christmas cake, a Yule log. But it was a real thing. And the children would decorate the edge of the log with designs of the ghosts, of the gods, rather. And it would then burn in the hearth of a home for the 12 days of the Yule. And it was very bad luck to let it go out. And generally, they keep a piece of the previous year's Yule log to light it. So you get this kind of continuity, this cycle, this renewal was kind of going on. The Vikings kind of loved that idea. But this Yule log was cut from a tree that wasn't seasoned. It was greenwood. So consequently, it burned cool and slow and smoky and aromatic, which meant the houses were full of scents. And scents or smells is one of the things that you can sort of ask people about Christmas, and they'll sort of forget. But as soon as you say scents, they go, oh yeah, those smells of Christmas are kind of a really important element of it. That's what kind of takes us back, like Madeleines in, what's that remembrance thing? Proust. You know, smell the Christmas smells and you're instantly back at Christmas, right? And back in childhood. So the smells and scents of Christmas were really, really important. The Vikings, they want to fill their homes full of this aromatic, floral, piney fragrance. And they'd have fattened up a pig over the autumn, and now it's time to slaughter the pig. So this is done, of course, in tribute to the gods, but it then means they're going to get to eat plenty of meat, which is fantastic. Everyone loves eating meat, right? Or the Vikings certainly did. And so the Christmas ham is very much a Viking tradition. That is 100% from their culture. And if you go to Scandinavia at Christmas, you'll see, like we might have robins on our Christmas cards, they have pigs. The story of the Christmas pig is huge in Scandinavia, and for a lot of people who didn't have much money, it was one time of the year where they could eat plenty of meat. So it was really important. What else? So they would also go and cut a conifer tree. So our Christmas tree was a Viking. Nailed it. Tick it off, right? Another one. And the reason for this is the Vikings believed that their superior abilities in battle, in navigating, in trading, in fighting, derived from the protectors they had. And they believed that these protectors were the tree spirits. They lived in the evergreens. But that during winter, these protective spirits would walk the earth as ghosts. So Christmas ghost stories, Viking, tick it off on your list. Okay? And so the Vikings felt rather underprotected. Another reason why the men would come home to protect the wives and families. And so what they do is they cut a tree and they decorate it with lights and candles and so forth, but nice things to eat and presents, gingerbread and so forth, because they're trying to lure back the spirits, right? So the whole thing of the Christmas tree is luring the tree spirits back into your home and pretends. How marvellous is that? I mean, that is just wonderful, right? And we don't even know about it, we don't recognise it, but we all do it dutifully each year. Bring a tree in, decorate it, and it is a Viking tradition about the tree spirits. So, of course, then the dads will come home and the children will have grown. And isn't it wonderful? You know, you've seen children for a long time, how much they've grown. And you've now got an opportunity for the children to show their dads how they've kind of developed. Now, a really, really important part of kind of Viking culture is fighting. And particularly defending villages, because often the village gets attacked while the warrior's away. That's a problem. You've only got the older men, the women, and the children. The children have got to be part of the defensive kind of structures. So they have to teach the children how to fight. But of course, what you don't want to do is give them axes and swords. That's not going to end at all well, right? So what they do instead is they harness something that is in very plentiful supply in Scandinavia. And that, everybody, is snow. So snow, or rather snowballs, are a proxy. They're a proxy for a very effective and potent defensive weapon, which is a big pile of rocks. Because if you can teach children to pick up a rock, hurl it, flat, trajectory, with pace and accuracy, and that's going to hit an attacker, that's a pretty potent weaponry. You're not going to keep coming forward if you're being pelted with rocks. So consequently, what the children are doing is they're developing these motor skills with snow. And so, of course, when the dads come back, they build a whole bunch of snowmen that are, of course, the attackers. And the children demonstrate who can knock its hat off, who can hit it in the eye, who has got the best throw. It's a competition. They all celebrate, they all love it, they all get involved. And at the end of it, a great big snowball fight, we're told. So it's great kind of fun. And what's kind of interesting, about all this is that, snow is still central to our kind of understanding, particularly over here in Europe. But so few of us experience snow. And I say over in Europe, not because I'm excluding people on the North American continent, but rather pretty much most of the ideas that you guys have of Christmas have come from immigrants coming over, so they brought European traditions. So it kind of makes sense to talk about Europeans at this kind of point. Is that we associate Christmas with snow, but in most countries, Christmas, it doesn't snow. It's not cold enough. And yet, on every Christmas image, every Christmas calendar, every kind of Christmas presentation, Christmas video, Christmas movie, it snows. And that's because it's my contention that we're all homesick Vikings. Because home was snow. You might be hundreds of miles away, farming in East Yorkshire. You might be raiding Paris, trying to get some booty, plunder and swag for your family. It wouldn't snow. It snowed at home. Going home for Christmas, going home for Yule. That's the association with snow. It's homesickness. It's a lovely idea that's so shot through that 1,000 years after the collapse of the Viking Empire, we still can't separate Christmas and snow. It's a Yule sort of motif. But what they really love to do was tell the children stories. And the children love to hear stories of the gods, in particular the stories of Odin, who was the chief amongst the gods. And the children were told that this lord of Valhalla, that during Yule, he would walk the earth looking for people to reward for good behaviour, particularly children. And that because he had a very identifiable physical scar, he was missing an eye, he had a black ring where his eye should be, he had to adopt a disguise. The disguise with which he used was that of an old man with a long white beard, and to disguise his missing eye, he wore a hooded cloak. He was called Yule Man, Christmas man. And the children were told that if you've been good, Yule Man will come and call, and he will give you a magnificent gift. Because Yule Man has the best gifts ever. Because they're made by little people. The Yulenisse. The elves in the halls of Valhalla will produce the most magical gifts for children that would astound and delight children everywhere. But the children were told, of course, you have to be good. Otherwise, Yule Man will pass on by. And the parents were told that if your children have been good, you must inform Yule Man by placing a green wreath upon your door, a round wreath. And the wreath was called a sun wheel. And the sun wheel represented the passage of the sun, light through the year, but also Odin's missing eye. So Christmas wreath on your door, that's saying, Yule Man, come and call, my kids have been good. They need to be rewarded. But of course, children being children, they ask questions, they'd worry, wouldn't they? And they'd agonise, and say, well, what happens if he runs out of presents before he gets to me? And they were told, don't worry. he has a magical sack. And within that sack are as many gifts as he needs, no matter how many times he goes into the sack. If you have been good, there'll be a present just for you. Other children might worry and say, well, how is it can get to us all in one night? And again, they're told, don't worry, because he has a magical sleigh that is drawn through the night sky by flying horses. And so he's able to utilise his magic sleigh, his magic sack, to visit each and every child in one night. If you have been good, the goodness will be rewarded. So that is Christmas, right? Christmas is Yule and Yule is Christmas. We have two things that run in parallel. So next time you see an image, a calendar, a Christmas card, have a look. Is it Christian? Is it Yule? Is it a nativity? Or is it Christmas trees? Is it a gift giver? Is it reindeers? Is it sleigh? Is it Christmas wreaths? Is it evergreens? Is it baubles? Because if it is, it's Yule. That is how embedded the two of them are. So, let me just take another sip of my 0%. I should get sponsored for this, shouldn't I? Sponsored by 0%. Brought to you by Surprisey Times. So, let's kind of move on. And let's talk a bit about the medieval era now. Because, of course, the Vikings are ultimately beaten back by the Normans in this country. They're driven from these shores. And the Normans very much adopt and embrace Christianity. So from that point onwards, the church are now in control of this Christmas narrative. And when I talk about this on tour, when I do this in person, I'll be doing it tomorrow night in York, I do this on the shambles. So I thought I'll have a look at the shambles while I do this. And just because you can never too much the shambles. So the shambles are so what's going to be about medieval Christmas is, in many respects, it's not totally simple tomorrow. Now, this was taken a few weeks, so it's but the Christians were told it was full. What's interesting is, like the Vikings, they believe the evidence contained spirits. Whereas the Vikings saw these spirits as being looked after them, protected. So the Christians were evil spirits, they were sprites. And so consequently, it's quite surprising the Christians were told to take the horse to fill their homes with greenery. Because in effect what that meant was filling the home with practices of Christmas. The idea of why well, the answer is because you're then going to embark on a celebration. 12 days of Christmas. You're going to be feasting, you're going to be partying, you're going to be celebrating, playing games, singing songs. And so the reality control the lights are going to begin to rumble. As each night goes by, they become less and less ill-disposed to you. As a result, video. Hopefully that's gone. I don't know how that came back on, but hopefully that has all gone for you. So by 12th night, these demons, these devils, are kind of completely relaxed. They've become completely, they've been sucked in to the celebration, to the happiness. And so on 12th night, the Christians are told, rip down your decorations and hurl them onto the fire. And that when you hear the hisses, the screams, the pops and the bangs of the burning evergreens, then you'll know that the devil and all his works has been destroyed. So interesting, this has kind of worked its way through into the modern age as bad luck. We say if you don't take your decorations down on 12th night, it's bad luck. Which is kind of interesting, right? We've lost the sense of what this was about in the first place. But that, I think, is tradition. That's what it is us following these ideas, following these behaviours year after year, but losing a sense of why it is that we do things. A fantastic example of that is, of course, something that really freaked out these Christians in the medieval period. Very, very superstitious. And they were told that anything that stays green in winter belongs to the devil. So when the Brussels sprout appears in the middle of the 14th century, it causes enormous consternation and panic. People are quite literally terrified of the sight of the Brussels sprout. And it causes a moral panic. People believe that within the little folds of this tiny cabbage, the devil resides, just waiting to occupy your insides, to fill you full of noxious fumes, and eventually you'll blow up and explode. That is the devil's plan with the Brussels sprouts. So there's panic, there are riots, and the church think we've got to find a way of managing this. They feel they need to do something quite drastic to quell the concern. So it's decided to put the Brussels sprout upon trial. What they're going to do is they're going to hold an ecclesiastical court, and they said that we're going to appoint advocates for the prosecution and the defence. And the Brussels sprout is going to answer for its life. Now, of course, the Brussels sprout can't speak, so others speak on its behalf. But nonetheless, that's what happened. So imagine that you are sworn in. You are now a juror. Let me know in the chat if you believe the Brussels sprout is either a gift from God or spawn of the devil. Because they were the choices that were on offer. These were the dimensions of possibility for what the Brussels sprout could be. So while you're answering that, I'm going to jump forward. I'm going to tell you where the decision came. It was decided that a Brussels sprout was probably not sent by the devil. Actually, there's not a right lot of fresh food to eat in winter, so it's probably okay to eat it. The church said don't eat too many. And that is sage advice, ladies and gentlemen, to this very day, do not eat too many. But they said, either they can eat them, just to make sure, you must cut a Christian cross into the base of each one. Now, many people still do this pretty much every night on the tour. People say, I do that. I thought it cooked them better. And every year, the TV chefs will say, no, don't do that. You'll make them soft. What I would say is, what chance has Jamie Oliver got when we do things because our mum did them, and her mum did them, and her mum did them? The mothers all the way back have taught us what Christmas is. We simply follow that. We're not interested in doing new things. Some of us, some maybe. But that's how these things continue. You know, we are completely disassociated with the original reason for doing it. We cut across into Brussels sprout, and that's still the norm. And sort of before we just move on to the kind of the next period, another sort of interesting thing of the medieval Christmas was wassailing. I'm sure you may have heard of wassailing. It's got a forerunner of carol singing, knocking on the door, singing a song, wishing people a Merry Christmas. The song "We Wish You a Merry Christmas" is the song of the wassailers, and they'd hope to get something nice to eat or drink in return. Usually it was children that would do this, particularly on the 28th of December, the Feast of the Holy Innocents, when it was a night of the children, would go out and do wassailing. But often adults would do it too, because of the law of the drink, getting free drink. But of course, what could go wrong going from door to door to door and having a drink at each one? Well, I can probably see where I'm going with this. So in the Song of the Wassailers, we wish you a Merry Christmas, which dates from about 1500, you'll recall that by verse 2, these guys have got the munchies. They're very hungry, but only one thing will do. Nothing else will suffice. It has to be, and I know before I say it, you're going to know what I'm going to say, it has to be figgy pudding. Nothing else will do. It has to be figgy pudding. But by the third verse, they won't go until they've got some. So we've now got an idea of these drunk guys on your doorstep, swaying, demanding food with menaces, making a flipping nuisance of themselves. And believe it or not, people observed that some were beginning to abuse the spirit and the true meaning of Christmas. They were using Christmas as an excuse to drink too much, to misbehave, to overindulge. And so, if you're interested, if anybody ever asks the question, when do we start to lose the true meaning of Christmas? The best and most honest answer you can give to them is it was seen to be around about 1500 is when we started. And from that kind of point in time, Christmas started to get a bad name. In small numbers at first, but gradually the voices grew and grew, saying this Christmas is a menace. It's a high time it was banned. But of course, only one man was brave enough to ever do that. Does anybody know who that man is? I'll just let the chat catch up for just a moment, have a little sip, a libation of my 0%. And I hope you're all enjoying yourselves. How are we doing for time? Not too bad. So, let us move on. So, let's shoot forward 300 years from the introduction of Brussels sprouts to the arrival of a chap who was a dictator on these shores, whose name was Oliver Cromwell. So Oliver Cromwell had come to power after what they call the Reformation. So we'd stopped being a Catholic country, we're now a Protestant country, and he is the leader of the Puritans. They've also got rid of the royal family. So King Charles I at the end of the English Civil War, his head cut off. So we're now a republic under a dictator of Oliver Cromwell. And Oliver Cromwell is basically the head of the fun police. He hates everything, right? He hates everything. So his idea and the Puritans' idea is if it's not work and it's not prayer and it's not reading the scriptures, it's a frivolous waste of time. You are completely missing the point of what you're here to do. So consequently, when they get the power, they begin to shut everything down. Singing, dancing, theatre, pubs, sports, you name it, craft pastimes, it was banned. You couldn't even sit there and crochet or sew. Distraction. Don't do it. Unless you're mending clothes, that's probably okay. Okay. But not for fun, just for practical purposes. Because that's work, then, of course. So basically, England becomes this place that is kind of very, very kind of insular and very focused on faith. And what really kind of gets the goats to the Puritans, though, like John Knox in Scotland, as Dawn was saying, absolutely. I mean, he really is, bleaker than bleak. They hate everything. What they see, though, is the Catholic calendar. This really gets on the goat because they see they've got rid of the Catholics, but instead you've still got Whitsuntide, you've got Easter, you've got Christmas, religious holidays, holy days, of course, in the Catholic calendar. So they want to get rid of them. So one by one they go. And finally, in 1649, Christmas is in their sights. And Christmas is banned. Christmas is no more. No parties, no getting together, no friends and family, no gifts, no drinking, nothing. It's a working day. In fact, people are going to be fined, possibly even imprisoned, if they don't go to work or school on Christmas Day. It's one day like every other, except, of course, we know it isn't. It's the 25th of December. But nonetheless, they push on. Initially, it's quite popular. They kind of invoke British separatism and go, Europe does Christmas, we do our own thing. But of course, before too long, people start to say, oh, we liked Christmas, it was nice, time off work, getting together, friends and family, it was lovely, right? Can we not have it back? And of course, there's no way the Puritans are going to allow a Catholic festival to come back. People say, well, fine, let's just ditch the Christian bit. We're not that worried about it, never really understood it anyway. How about we just get together, have a drink, have a party, nice things to eat, downtime, family time, play some games? Wouldn't that be lovely? So basically, there starts to be a campaign for the return of Christmas, which culminates in the preparation of a very, very famous pamphlet in 1653. And this is known as the Vindication of Christmas. So the Vindication of Christmas was a call for return to a secular Christmas. Drinking, partying, and at the centre of it was a call led by the guy who's in the middle of your image there, who they called Father Christmas. Father Christmas is the first time that name appears anywhere in the printed world. So Father Christmas calls for the return of Christmas. They give him a lovely song to sing. It's very long, but the first three lines of the song are, let's sing, let's dance, let's give good cheer, for Christmas comes but once a year. Draw hogshead dry, let flagons fly. So hogshead, great big barrels of beer, flagons are drinking vessels. So basically it's a drunken, boozy affair. People getting drunk and throwing their leather tankards around. So that's what they want Christmas to be. The man at the centre of this is Father Christmas, but he doesn't wear red. I'm sure many of you instantly, when I say what colour did he wear, will know and be shouting in your heads, I know this, it is green. And the reason for that is Father Christmas is the green man. He is the man of the English harvest. He is Father Nature. So he's associated with the coming of the harvest. So it's this reintroduction of this idea of Christmas, of not being a Christian festival, but a pagan festival to celebrate and prepare for a good harvest. That's what Christmas was meant to be. But do we think that these Puritans were convinced by this line of argument for the return of a pagan, boozy Christmas festival? I'm sure you'll not be surprised to know the answer is not even slightly. So consequently, the calls for return of Christmas fell on deaf ears. But the Puritans had a bigger problem to deal with. The harvests were beginning to suffer. As each year went by without Christmas, so consequently the harvest did worse and worse. And so finally, by 1659, 10 years after Christmas was banned, it was in a very poor state, people on the verge of famine. And it was in this year that Oliver Cromwell died. He's briefly replaced by his son, Richard, but his busted flushes all over. And so the following year in 1660, the monarch is returned. King Charles II, son of Charles I, who was executed, becomes the monarch. They don't do the merry monarch. Officially, because he reopens theatres, dancing, pubs, fun, but also he has 12 illegitimate children. So kind of merry in all manner of ways, as you might say. But nonetheless, he reintroduces Christmas. So in 1660, for the first time in 11 years, we have a Christmas. Christmas is reintroduced. And of course, it is the Christmas for the ages. So people, of course, now have pinned their hopes on Christmas's back, that is bound to appease Father Christmas, the man of the harvest, so we can look forward to a bountiful and plentiful harvest the following year. So based on that, ladies and gentlemen, what do we think was the result of the harvest of 1661, the year after Christmas had returned? Well, let me tell you, the harvest of 1661 was one of the worst on record. So people were devastated, thought we've not gone far enough. We need to go further. Here's what we're going to do. What we're going to do is we're going to go and we're going to dig up Oliver Cromwell. He's been dead almost 2 years at this point in time. No matter. We're going to dig him up. We're going to hang his corpse. We're going to cut his head off, stick it on a spike. It was on view in Trinity College until the 1920s. We're then going to cut his body into quarters and send it around the country. And it seems that was enough, because the following year, the harvest of 1662 was plentiful. And again in 63, 64, 65, right up to 1666. And that one of the issues that caused the Great Fire of London was there was so much bounty that was sat around. There was lots of fuel. So people believe we restored the link to Christmas and the harvest that is there to this day. Farmers, you'll often see in this country a lone oak tree in the middle of a field. They won't cut it down, they'll farm around it, because what comes out of the oak tree? Mistletoe. They won't cut down holly bushes or ivy because they associate spirit Christmas and the harvest together as one. Deeply suspicious that bond is there. And it seems that in that period where we didn't celebrate Christmas, we turned our back on the planet, and so the planet turned its back on us. We were no longer existing in harmony with the planet. Perhaps a lesson for the ages for us there. But as a little kind of coda to that, that'll no doubt be of interest to those of you in the USA. The Puritans were not at all happy with this. They were downright furious, let's be honest. Their view was this was Catholicism coming back in by the back door. They hated the idea. And so they were so chewed off with this that many of them got in boats. They first went over to Leuven in the Netherlands, the Low Countries, and had a Protestant community over there before setting sail for the New World. And when they arrived in the New World, Christmas was not part of it. They, of course, have their own celebration. Thanksgiving to this day, huge celebration in the States. Now, probably in many respects, Christmas has caught up with it, maybe it's overtaken it. But it wasn't the case in the early years. In fact, it was only the arrival of immigrants. Think about it. The Latinos, the Italians, the Irish. When the Catholics came to the North American continent, they brought with them their faith, and they introduced Christmas to North America. So it's quite the irony that a country that was founded upon an anti-Christmas sentiment is now probably the global home of Christmas celebration. So the Puritans really didn't get their way. So just as a marker, I can't be doing the Puritans. I know they're your ancestors. I can only apologise because they came from these shores. But we were glad to see the back of them. Once they'd gone, we started having fun all over again. And, you're welcome to them. My apologies if there are any Puritans out there. All I can do is say it's Christmas. It's a time of forgiveness. So I beg your forgiveness. So let's push on. We are nearing the end of our time together. But there's still somebody that we haven't really talked about that is somewhat remiss of me not to have mentioned him thus far. And that, of course, is Santa Claus. So when I was a child, the Christmas gift giver was Father Christmas. Now my children, and our grandchildren, no doubt, in a couple of years, will start saying Santa. It sort of becomes synonymous, right? As if it's the same person, but it's not. We know that Father Christmas is the green man, he's from the harvest. But I'm sure that many of you will know that Father Christmas, that Santa Claus, comes from a very different source. He comes from a real man, a Christian bishop that lived in the 4th century in what today is modern day Turkey, and that is Saint Nicholas. So Saint Nicholas was a bishop. He was a really lovely man. He exemplified kind of Christian values, kind, generous, considerate, patient. He was also very wealthy, and he used his private wealth to help people, to dispense with charity, but in a way that people didn't even know, didn't embarrass people. He would just deposit coins, people could find them, and so he was much loved around the town. And when he died, there was a great deal of kind of grief, and before long, he was both beatified and then made a saint. So he becomes Saint Nicholas, and Saint Nicholas becomes the patron saint of both children and also of the sailors. And it is in this respect of his patron saint of sailors that his cult kind of really grows, and no more so than in the port of Amsterdam, which you may well have seen. Stefan may have taken you to see this. The arrival of St. Nicholas on the 5th of December, ahead of his feast day, which is on the 6th of December, is a huge event. You will see St. Nicholas here portrayed in bishop's garb, but crucially, of course, with his long white beard and his red cloak. So, contrary to popular sentiment, it is not Coca-Cola that makes the gift giver dress in red. It comes from St. Nicholas. And the Dutch children, in saying St. Nicholas, pronounce it Santa Claus. St. Nicholas is Santa Claus. So St. Nicholas comes, and the children are told that if you've been good, then you can expect lots of lovely gifts. But if you haven't, you're going to capture the attention of his travelling companion, who's captured in the image in front of you now. Now, quite controversially, this guy whose name is Schwarze Piet, Black Pete, is meant to be an African because St. Nicholas, Santa Claus, resides in Spain during the rest of the year. But of course, he's a blackface. And so as each year goes by, there's more and more pressure not to indulge in blackface for obvious reasons. So Schwarze Piet is being kind of pushed out. But St. Nicholas stays, or Santa Claus, stays in the kind of centre of this. But Schwarze Piet is also known by another name in Central Europe. And he's known as Krampus. You may have heard of kind of Krampus. So Krampus is, in effect, a devil. He is a demon, a forked tongue, horns, hooves, etc. And he is there as a kind of anti-Santa. He's there to kind of punish children. He's there to basically remind them of what happens if they don't behave. We can see here Victorian Krampus Christmas cards, which are very, very popular, were there to scare children, that he would come and torment them. If you hadn't been good, then Krampus will come your way. But actually, this tormenting, as nasty as it looks, that horrible, vile, long tongue he's got in the middle there, and in all three pictures, is he would often leave a birch rod for the parents of unruly children to kind of bring them back into line. But woe betide any child that he had to come back and see a second occasion, because Krampus carried on his back a basket. And if he came to see a child for a second year running, into the basket the child would go, and we never seen again. It's quite remarkable they kind of put child abduction at the heart of their kind of Christmas story. But nonetheless, that was the story. And I guess it comes from a kind of era where Europe was a dangerous place, full of wolves and bears and dodgy people. So the idea was, behave yourself, be good, do what your mum and dad say. Because really what you want is children to make it through to adulthood, where they can then in turn look after you. So the rewarding of children, the giving of presents, is really a celebration, we think, of the children making it through another year. And so when we kind of think about it in those terms, it starts to make sense. And there was a kind of weird customs from this era that made its way almost through the modern era, where within people's stockings, they would typically find an orange or a tangerine and a piece of coal. And what this represents takes us all the way back to the beginning of our story. In Egypt, remember the drawing, the picture, the representation of what we had? We had Set, the god of the sky, with his son. Sorry, we had Horus, the god of the sky, and Set, the serpent. So it's the good and the evil, the light and the darkness, this kind of moral sort of scale being kind of played out. But of course, what children are told is if you behave, then consequently you'll get rewarded. Now, Gregory, for instance, just asked about did children get to sleep on Christmas Eve? Well, that's a great question, because the Christmas gift giver appears in different guises, different names, different places, different days. So for the children of the countries that venerate St. Nicholas, that date is the 6th of December. In Germanic countries in Central Europe, the Christmas gift giver wasn't the man with the long white beard, it was the Christkind, the Christ child, who would come to your home. If your children are being good, you signify it by putting a fairy on top of your Christmas tree. That's where the fairy comes from. But the children were told, if you stay awake, if you see the Christ child, your presents will disappear. So what a great way of getting kids to go to bed and go to sleep on Christmas Eve. In Russia, in his Slavic countries, we have Dід Mороz, and his granddaughter is the gift giver, and they receive the presents on the 31st of December. In Spain and Italy, we have La Befana, the witch. She dollies out her present on the 6th of January on Epiphany, celebrating the arrival of the Magi, the three kings. So what's kind of really interesting is all the way across Europe, different cultures, we've got these different versions of the same story, this gift giver that comes to the home, starting in the kind of Viking era, but working around all these different nation states. But essentially always the same story, that goodness brings its own rewards, that the children will be rewarded at Christmas time for being good. Which is a lovely story. It's a time to celebrate innocence and happiness. Krampus to one side, perhaps. It's a lovely idea. And when our children get too old and too cynical to believe in it, we look forward to the grandchildren, nieces, nephews, young ones around, so we can start it all over again. We love embracing and rejoicing the innocence and the happiness and the magic, because we know what real life's like, and people are going to be grown up for a long time, so let them have the magic. There is something wonderful about us all being nice to each other, at least for 2 weeks of the year. Normal service will resume in January. Let's enjoy it while we can. So we're sort of running over a little bit in time now. So I'm just going to cut us into now the final bit. Just bear with me 1 second. Just try that one more time. And we're going to technically Christmas tree and stops Christmas, but actually this we have Queen Victoria playing with a young family around the Christmas tree. And of course her husband is Prince Albert, who is German. So it's a German tradition that is being brought into our kind of homes. And Prince Albert was determined to kind of cement it in British culture. So consequently, what he did was he organised to have trees brought into public spaces, public areas. So very, very quickly they became visible, they became part of our kind of Christmas. Now, originally the Christmas gifts were quite basic, really. They were crafts, people made them, things to eat like gingerbread, things to have ribbons for your hair and kind of nice things. But soon enough, in this era of the shopkeeper and the industrial kind of revolution, then consequently there was the opportunity to begin to buy things. And so rather than make things, you bought things. Those presents became bigger, more kind of complicated. They become too heavy to hang off the tree, and so now they go under the tree. So the Victorians, what they kind of do is they pull all this kind of stuff together. They shine it all up for us, and they kind of present it back as a kind of commercial offering. Everything is about kind of consumption. In the kind of the upper middle classes and the upper classes, the must-have gift is the upright piano, the pianola, and they want easy songs to play. So now we get the carols are brought together in these kind of volumes, very easy or kind of mostly major chords to play. So getting together and singing together. Um, but what the kind of really at the heart of Christmas for Victorians is this idea that Christmas is a time of thinking about other people, and this really comes from the publication of the most famous Christmas story of them all, which of course is A Christmas Carol. And when this is published in 1848, Dickens is already a hugely successful author, and at the heart of this story, what we've got is the story of Scrooge, a man with a heart of darkness. I'm waiting for the chat to catch up because I think that I've kind of switched off the sound. We shouldn't actually have any volume. I hope not anyway. And so we've got this man with a heart of darkness, and he can't embrace the light. He sits there in the semi-darkness with a kind of tiny candle, and he has one coal on the fire, so he sits there in darkness. And as a result of this, he won't let light into his life. But the ghosts of Christmas presents, so again these ghost stories, is what the Christmas present does is he takes him to the house of Bob Cratchit. Bob Cratchit is his employee. He lives on very, very poor wages. They're a family with very little materially, and of course they have a disabled son in Tiny Tim. So basically, what Scrooge expects to see is the chains of misery, but instead he sees the bonds of love. This family that come together and radiate happiness and love and joy as a transformative effect upon Scrooge. It changes the path of his life. From that point onwards, he becomes instead a benefactor. He is no longer the Scrooge of old. The first thing he does is he goes and buys them a turkey. Okay. And so for the Victorians, they see this as a calling for a Christmas to have a higher sense of purpose, to think about those less fortunate. Little Match Girl is published around the same time. The story, of course, of a girl that dies on Christmas night from exposure to the cold. So this idea of putting others first, bringing those into your homes for Christmas, inviting people over, making sure that everybody is being looked after, is this Victorian idea that largely is sort of super boosted by A Christmas Carol. And of course, Christmas cards are introduced around this time, raising funds for charity. But the thing that the Victorians most love to do at Christmas is to take a trip to the pantomime. And the pantomime is the most glorious of all the Christmas entertainments. I'm hoping you're all familiar, all au fait with the pantomime, but its roots you may be less so with. And it comes to us from the Italian comic opera, known as the Commedia dell'arte. And the Commedia dell'arte arrived on these shores in Britain in the middle of the 18th century with Italian emigres. They came over in stage performers, they became clowns, like Joseph Grimaldi, the famous clown. And so consequently, it became very popular. And at the heart of the comic opera was what they call the Harlequinade. The Harlequinade was a comic mime, and it involved four major characters. Harlequin, who's the hero, he's always portrayed in a leotard, checked and coloured. He wears a mask and usually a black pointed hat. His girlfriend is Columbine. They're deeply in love, but Columbine is from a different social class. She's from a much higher social class, and consequently her father, the third character, is not going to allow their union. He wants Columbine to marry much better than a lazy servant like Harlequin. And so he employs the fourth character, the clown, to keep the lovers apart. And so we have this comedic mime played out, full of chases, tumbles, jumps, hiding, mistaken identities, ridiculous happenings, before finally the lovers, Columbine and Harlequin, get together. And so consequently, their love is so pure and it is so strong the father's heart melts. He agrees for Columbine and Harlequin to be together. We have the happy ending. Yet give a sprinkling of the English musical into there. Harlequin becomes the principal boy and the clown becomes the dame. So the dame initially is a bad character. In the end, to the modern world, they are more a character that interferes, that gets things wrong, that messes things up. It's only when the dame stops interfering, the path of true love can occur and we get the happy ending. So that's the pantomime. And it seems that at this time of year, we embrace the ridiculousness, the bizarre, and frankly, incredibly unlikely storylines of the pantomime. Because we love to be playful. We love chaos. People that don't play games at any time of the year want to play games at Christmas. It impacts upon us. It links us to these ancient times. And of course, the principal boy is played by a man. By a woman, sorry. And the dame, female character, is played by a man. So we've got this role reversal. We've got this gender switch. He's taking us all the way back to Saturnalia. Because there's something in humanity that sees in this time of year an opportunity to be different, to think different, to act different, but to do it the same. We repeat it, it connects us back through the years. We all carry our ghosts of Christmas past. We reflect on those that are no longer with us, that were once part of our Christmases. But how wonderful to welcome a new baby, baby's first Christmas, truly magical, or puppy's new Christmas, or whatever we've got. We get to start all over again because it's within us. It's not what we do, it's who we are. And it's shot through humanity back as far as the ancient times. So I do hope that's made some sense of Christmas for you. I do hope it's given you the odd one cockle here and there, a little twinkle, the thoughts that we can and should be better. But equally a reminder, there's some bizarre things, there's some dark characters. We have Krampus, we have Saturn, the child-eating god that kind of kicks it all off. So if you're going to be naughty this Christmas, you won't be the first either. So thank you so much for joining me on this Christmas tour. And all that remains to say is to say good night and Merry Christmas. And thank you everybody for supporting me through another year. And we look forward to New Year. And at New Year we'll do a special. We will talk about the history of New Year because I've saved that from tonight. So we'll have a shorter tour, but we will do a history of the New Year and its traditions and New Year. So do join in. I can see you all getting into the pantomime spirit there. So thank you so much from York and from here. Good night. If you're able to support this tour, I do appreciate that. But either way, thank you for joining me. I look forward to seeing you all very, very soon. Thank you and good night.